How, in your idea, what do you think that MSSPs can do to stay ahead of the curve and prepare for something that will happen eventually?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard to even think about that phrase of staying ahead of the curve, right? If I was ahead of the curve, I think we would be in a different position, right? So I think it's like I kind of mentioned in that previous question, it's more of a chess match, right? It's, we make a move to prevent certain things, and then they discover a new vulnerability, and then we make a move, and then they make a move, right? So it's a weird analogy, but truly what it is it's a chess match between, these hackers and then these bad guys, and then obviously security experts, and how do we kind of go back and forth, right? But I mean, I think from our perspective, what we try to do to at least stay educated and try to stay as much as we can on that curve, maybe not ahead of it, but as close to it as we can is, like I mentioned, is we've got dedicated product development and dedicated security experts within Collabrance that I trust them, that they're looking out in the industry. They're obviously doing their own internal research, that they're spending the time, and that's their time to make sure that we're staying informed and try to stay ahead as much as we can. We also try to leverage our network of our current customers, right? Whether that's, current MSPs that we work with, end customers that we work with, suppliers and channel partners that we have across, because each partner that we have, they're in different sectors, right? Whether that's a supplier from the UTM side or a supplier from the backup standpoint. Each of them obviously have experts within their organization. So how do we leverage across everybody and share information that we're kind of seeing, right? So it's really building that framework and network to be able to pass information back and forth and just truly brainstorm on what we're seeing within the industry. And then the last thing, right, is we try to do our best is, like I mentioned, is having those relationships with industry and analysts and peer groups, right? So even competitors, right? If we, as a competitor, somebody else can share information that's for the greater good and the security of end customers, it's something that we need to do, right? So it's leveraging not only suppliers and partners, but it's also peers across the industry to make sure that everybody that is truly what I would say on the good side has got information available to make necessary decisions and make business decisions or maybe shift direction in order to kind of overcome some of those bad guys and the attacks that they're trying to do.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned how hard it is to actually predict something like that from happening. But from a cybersecurity solution perspective, what's the current trend there? Is there a shift in focus, and do you agree with the direction that they are moving towards?
That's a really good question. I think obviously I think you're seeing two different types of shifts, and I think there's the email security and user education that we kind of talked about in some of the previous questions. But I also think there's a heavy movement on the risk assessment side that I don't think a lot of MSPs used to utilize in the prior life, right? And I think that I do agree with those. I think the focus on email and user education is crucial to keep organizations safe, right? If you think about the amount of information and data that's being transmitted to those platforms, it's kind of scary, and so I think it's continue to educate and make sure that we can put as much security around as we can, obviously without, constraining the business too much, right? Because you obviously need to be able to have them operate, but like we said, right, you may have to sacrifice some convenience for some of that security. So I do agree with that, and that's obviously something that Collabrance has focused on from an email security standpoint, but also from like the security awareness training side, right? How to educate those users. And then obviously, the other point that I made is, I do think it's important to leverage those risk assessments because we've got to be able to identify the potential risk within that organization to be able to help put the mitigation steps in place. And I think that's something that obviously Etactics has spent a great deal of time investing in to be able to develop a solution and help identify what those risks may be and the necessary mitigation steps to put in place to help that organization, right? So I do agree I think that's a fairly common theme within the industry. But one area that I think is just kind of more my opinion based that I kind of touched base on in the first question is I feel like there are some organizations and some individuals in MSPs that are truly looking at these new products and services to be a fail-safe solution. And at times, our organization is included in this, right, that we rely too heavily on the products themselves. And we don't spend enough time on truly understanding our customers' needs, right? And that's something that Collabrance has always tried to take the approach to and preach on is there's nothing more valuable, right, than truly taking the time to understand your customers. So, if you think about, things such as if an incident does happen, and it's going to happen, what's the first thing that we need to do to help that customer get up and running and keep their business going? And that question is going to differ from each customer that you work with, right? There's not going to be the same thing every time. And that And your cybersecurity solution is not going to be able to answer that question, right? So it's truly, it's combining that diligent approach with your customers and including that sophisticated cybersecurity solution. You know, if an MSP is able to do that, they're not only going to be able to protect those customers, they're going to be able to differentiate themselves from their competitors, right? So I would say I agree with the trends that are going on from a solution standpoint, but it's just a continual reminder in education is that nothing is more critical than spending time with your customers and educating them about the risk. And if something does happen, what is our collective plan to get you back up and running and to mitigate as much risk as we can?